daily load us with benefit because He is the God of our salvation, right? God is the God of our salvation. And what I want to talk about today is just a continuation of what we've been talking about, the Word of God. Remember, we started with the Word of God last week, and we also talked about the wisdom of God. But I want us to see, to understand that the Word of God is different from the way we see it. The Word of God is different from how we think about it, or sometimes the way we understand it. It is much more different. So if we look at it from this perspective, if we understand that before God could create anything, He had to speak His word from Genesis chapter 1, right? And the Lord said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw the light was good. So He had to speak His word. And John chapter 1 verse 1 also emphasized that there was nothing that was made without the word of God, right?
Yes.
Do you guys think there's anything that we can accomplish in this life without the word of God? There's nothing. There's nothing we can accomplish in this life without the word of God. There's nothing we can do without the word of God. But sometimes we forget that the word of God is not just a narrative. What I say, the word of God is not narrative. The word of God is what? Creative. It's not just a story. Like we're just reading the Bible and just like following the story, and God said this and that will happen, and that, oh, that's what the word of God is about. No. There is a power in the word of God that allows things to happen when that word is set in motion. There is a power in the word of God that causes things to happen when the word of God is being set in motion. And we have to understand that. Because sometimes you guys will think, oh, I said the word of God is the most important thing in the entire creation. Did I say that right? It's the most important thing because the word of God is God. And that's what Psalm 19 was telling us. It gives wisdom. The word of God gives wisdom. The word of God gives understanding. The word of God helps us to attain the things we need to attain. It's very powerful. The word of God is very powerful. No matter what's going on in the world, no matter what is going on in the place, once God speaks or once the word of God is released, that's the solution. Anything can be happening until the word of God is being released. But immediately God releases His word, that's the solution to whatever that thing is. So let's go to Genesis and look at what Genesis chapter 1. And let's take an example from Genesis chapter 1. So in Genesis chapter 1, from the Living Translation, it says, "In the beginning God created heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." So let's stop there. Everything was formless, shapeless, until God came and what did God do? God said, "Let there be." He spoke, and there was light. That tells us something. This is what we got to understand. That tells us something. That establishes a principle. What happened here is not just narrative. It's a principle that God established. That when a situation is so chaotic and things are not in the right shape, things are not in the right way, the only changes you need is the release of the word of God to change things. God demonstrated this principle for us in Genesis chapter 1. This is not just a narrative that God here in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and darkness covered the face of the earth, and the Spirit of God hovers over the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. That's narrative. But then in this context, God established a principle that we need to understand. So God gave us an idea that whenever you come into a situation in life and everything becomes void, empty, without structure, the one thing that you need to put structure into anything is the Word. It's a principle of God. God will not change anything without releasing His Word. God will not turn anything around without... There's nothing that God would do without His Word. How do you think we can do anything without the Word of God? If God Himself would need His Word to do anything He wants to do, how do you think we can do anything without the Word of God? We cannot. We cannot. But the issue we have is the value that we attach to the Word of God is why we think the Word of God should be like the last resort. The Word of God is the first thing that we have to, consider when we are in a situation, no matter what's going on, an outbreak, a pandemic, epidemics, no matter what it is, war or anything. The Word of God is the first thing. And God set the principle that, look at this, He showed us as an example, everything is like, it disorganized, everything. The world was in chaos. Darkness covered the face of the deep. Everything was empty, without shape, void, no substance in it. And God showed up. What was it that God did? God said, He released His Word. The Word of God. I'm going to show us one more example to let us understand. The Word of God is more than what we think it is. The Word of God is not like, I'm just talking to you and say, hi guys. No. The Word of God is creative. When God releases His Word, that Word doesn't return to Him the same way. If God doesn't want anything to be done, He would tell Himself, hi God, if you don't want that thing to happen, don't say it, because you know that your word will never go unfulfilled. So when God gives you His Word, you have the totality of God with you. Peradventure if that word is coming from God. So look at that principle. It's a principle. It's a model. God showed example. And He gave us an idea how He did things. The earth was without form. Darkness covered the face of the deep. Everything was not the way it's supposed to be. God did not like what He saw, right? And the only way to change everything was to do what? To speak His word to create those things. So He came on the scene and said, let there be light. So if God gives you that same word that He used in the beginning, there is nothing you cannot create with that word. That's why the Word of God is so important. That's why He told Joshua, He said, this book, which is the scroll He gave to Moses, and He said to Joshua, He said, the Lord, you have to meditate on this day and night. Not only meditate, and you have to observe to do those things that is written therein. Then that's when you can make your way successful. Why will you have to meditate on the Word? Now, look at this. It's just very ironic. Moses' assignment was different from Joshua's assignment. Moses brought the children out of the land of Egypt. And then God gave him scroll, the law. But now, Joshua's assignment was to do what? Was to distribute, give them their inheritance and fight some wars. But God still insists that if you want to make your way prosperous and have a good success, you have to meditate on the word day and night. Now, this is a question. Is it the word that God asked Joshua to meditate on day and night? Is it a strategic battlefield, concept? Does the law of God contains the strategy to fight war? Does the law of God contains, battle drills? Does the word of God contains real estate teaching? Why would God told Joshua to meditate on the word day and night? Go to Joshua chapter 1. Why did we have to tell him at the beginning of his assignment? In Joshua chapter 1, when you get to Joshua chapter 1, I'll read from New Living Translation. It says, verse 8, study the book of instruction continually, meditate on it day and night, so you'll be sure to obey everything written in it. So I want you to be able to obey this instruction in this manner, on this word. Why? It said, when you study it and meditate and you obey this thing, it said, only then will you prosper and succeed in all that you do. Only then. But then the question I'm trying to ask us today, why will God want him to study the law? The commandment he gave to Moses, the statutes. You remember in Deuteronomy chapter 7, it said,